Hello and welcome to this lecture on Classical Armenian. My name is Daniel Culligan and this is the second part of the introduction to the language. In this video we will take a short look at Classical Armenian literature, starting with the Bible translation and the translation of other, mostly Greek literature. We will see where the most important manuscript collections are located, what makes the so-called Hellenizing school of translation so special, and see the only fragment of pre-Christian literature preserved in Armenian on the birth of the god Vahagan. The first text to be translated into Armenian was the Bible by Mesrop Maštoc and his pupils around 410. The first version was probably made from the Syriac version, the Peshitta. It was then corrected by using the Greek text. The earliest manuscripts of Armenian date to the 9th century. This is the Gospel manuscript of Queen Milke from 862, which is now in Venice, in the library of the Armenian Catholic Order of the Mekatarists on the island of San Lazzaro, and the so-called Lazarian Gospel from Moscow, now in Yerevan, in the National Library, the Matenadaran. The first printed Armenian Bible dates from 1666 from Amsterdam. And the first printed book of Armenian is the Urbatagiek, which was printed a bit earlier in 1512. And here you can see two images of the Queen Milke Gospel that I just mentioned, and on the right the Lazarian Gospel. So you see the Armenian writing here very nicely on both images. And here you have two examples taken on the left from the Bible, the first printed Bible version printed by Oskan Yerevanci, and on the right the earliest book that we have in Armenian print, the so-called Urbatagiek, the Book of Friday Prayers. After the translation of the Bible, a lot of Greek literature was translated into Armenian, including commentaries and exegetical works on the Bible, writings of the Church Fathers, homilies, and so on. Alongside these translations, an original literature developed, frequently involving the same authors that also worked as translators, among them well-known persons like Koryun, a pupil of Mesrop, who wrote a biography of his teacher, and who is our most important source about the invention of the Armenian alphabet. An account of the Christianization of Armenia by Saint Gregory the Illuminator in the 3rd century and the early 4th century is given by an author with a telling name Agatangelos, that is, the good messenger, or the messenger of the good news. The text handed down as written by a Faustus of Byzantium tells the political events from the accession of Khosrov Kotak in the early 4th century, around 330, to the division of Armenia in 387. And an attempt to give a complete account of Armenian history in the vein of early medieval world chronicles is the work of Moses of Khorini, Moses Khorinatsi. And the important Battle of Avaraya, already mentioned, is treated in the works of Yerishe and Razar Parpetsi. Yeznik of Korb, Yeznik Korbatsi, is the most important theologian in late ancient Armenia, writing against heresies, Yerz Arandots, which includes Greek pagan philosophy, Mazdaism, and the Christian sect of the Marcionites. The Catholicos Johannes Odznetsi of the early 8th century wrote, among other things, against the sect of the Paulicians and produced a compilation of canon law. From later medieval poetry and prose, one should of course mention the Armenian Dante, Grigor Narekatsi, Grigor of Narek, writing a confessional monologue in his Book of Lamentations, and, for example, as an author of fables, Vardan Aigigtsi from the 13th century. The two libraries with the largest holdings of Armenian manuscripts are the National Library of Armenia, the Matenadaran, the collection of manuscripts in Yerevan itself. So this is what you see here, this is a picture of the Matenadaran taken from outside, and the Mekatarists library in Venice, so San Lazzaro degli Armeni, this is what you can see here on the other picture. And finally, the third to mention, the library of the Mekatarists in Vienna, which is an offshoot of the Brothers in Venice that also holds a large collection of manuscripts. So these are the three most important places for Armenian manuscripts. And here I give you a collection of online resources that you may find useful, including both text collections, online dictionaries, both of the classical and the modern language. So there's, of course, the well-known Titus collection made in Frankfurt. The Matina Duran has its own digital library online, so this is the digilib.am. There's a proprietary collection of texts that Jos Weitenberg originally founded, the Leiden Armenian Library of Armenian Texts. And there's also a good collection of scans only, however, in the University of Bonn, which are accessible online. For modern Eastern Armenian, there's a huge corpus of texts in the EANC, that is the Eastern Armenian National Corpus, where many modern Armenian authors are digitized and accessible and can be searched. And for the dictionaries, there is, on the one hand, the Nayeri page, which includes quite a number of dictionaries, among them the most important dictionary, the Norbagiek Haikasian Lesvi, and there's also a French site, Kalfa, which includes the dictionary of the author of this name, and also the Norbagiek. So there are various ways to get access to these collections. A special group of texts translated from Greek are those of the so-called Hellenizing school, the Hunaban de Prots. So Hunaban means Grecophile Greek, and de Prots is the word for school, which is characterized by a huge amount of new words imitating the structure of Greek grammar and lexemes. For example, by introducing a gender distinction, which Armenian itself does not have. So they use forms like, besides sa, which we will see in the section on morphology and syntax as well, a form like se. Now, this is a completely new formation that you won't find in any original Armenian text, but this is an invention made especially in the translation of the grammar of Dionysius Trax. So this large undertaking of translating texts of Greek learning is probably to be understood as the attempt to make the various fields of classical learning available to Armenian pupils and scholars, including grammar and philosophy. And as I just said, they even translated the Greek grammar of Dionysius Trax into Armenian. And also some works of Greek literature have only survived in the Armenian translation. So, for example, parts of Philo of Alexandria's De Providentia, and also parts of Irenaeus' Epidexis to Apostolicou Kerygmatos. So here we have a list of authors and works that were translated. So you see this, of course, relates to the Council of Chalcedon because, as we've already said, the Armenians rejected the Council of Chalcedon. So this was an important text for them. And then we have works on rhetorics, Aelius Theon, the Progymnasmata. Aristotle, of course, is very important as a foundation for philosophy, Iamblikos, and other works like Porphyrios, working on Aristotle's texts. There is the famous Armenian philosopher David Anhacht himself, David the Invincible, writing on the works of Porphyry, for example, and we have other works on philosophy, a commentary on the grammar of Dionysius Trax, and other works of philosophy, notably also translations of Plato, for example. So not all of his work is in Armenian translation, but a number of works have been translated into Armenian as well. And here you see some other authors that apparently interested the Armenians and so were translated. George of Pisidia, the Hexahemeron, so about the creation of the world, Phenomena of Aratus, so also about physics in general, and other works that the Armenians were interested in. Now, as an example for this type of translation, let's have a look at a sentence from Aristotle's De Interpretatione peri Hymeneias. So here we have a sentence, Esti de heis protos logos apophantikos kataphasis eta apophasis. So a simple affirmation is the first kind, a simple negation the second of those propositions called simple. Now, this is of course not easy to translate into Armenian because Armenian didn't have all these words in its language, so there was no philosophical terminology. So what did they do? They went for morpheme by morpheme or word by word translation. So you see in the Armenian sentence, you have e mi arajin ban, bats yerevakan stor asocium apa bats asotion. That is to say, we have here apophantikos, which is translated with bats, meaning away. So this is the apo is bats, corresponding to this Greek prefix, and a derivative of the verb yerevim, to appear, for the Greek phantikos, which is built on phainomai, to appear. The same goes for stor asotion, with sotor, corresponding to kata, and asotion, saying, for phasis, and also bats, asotion. Now, since these are all newly coined words in Armenian whose meaning is not obvious from their components, it is only by relating them back to the Greek original that they become understandable. So, for example, logos corresponds to ban, so a word like vera banution is the translation of analogia, and ver lutsution, with lutz corresponding to luo in Greek, is for Greek analysis. So this of course means that these texts were quite difficult to understand in Armenian itself because of this word by word or morpheme by morpheme translation, and what we see here is basically a kind of glossing of the Greek by Armenian elements so as to make the Greek text understandable. But still, quite a number of these words made it into the modern language, so they survived, although they were of course all calques at the beginning. Due to the conversion of the Armenians to Christianity, ancient places of pre-Christian worship were destroyed and churches built in their place. Similarly, only fragments of non-Christian literature have come down to us from antiquity. The most famous one is a fragment of a song on the birth of the dragon-slaying god Vahagan, who was worshipped in pre-Christian Armenia along with Aramazd, Mitra and Anahita as the supreme gods of the Zarathustrian pantheon. And here you can see the text. Yerkner Yakin, Yerkner Yakir, Yerkner Yevtsovn Sirani, Yerkenitsa Vununer, Yev as Karmrik Yeregnik, und Yergan por Zuch Elaner, und Yergan por Bots Elaner, Yevi Botsuin Vazer Hartiash Patanekik, na Hur Heruner, Bots Uner Morus, Yev Achkunkenein Aregakunk. So a translation is more or less heaven was in travail, earth was in travail, and even the Red Sea was in travail. The birth pain also held the red reed in the sea, and out of the reed came smoke, out of the reed came a flame, and out of the flame jumped a blonde-haired little boy, so this is the Patanikik, and he had fire for hair, flame he had for a beard, and his little eyes were suns. This fragment has been preserved by the historian Moses Khorenatsi, who cites it as an example of heathen lore. The text is full of rhetorical devices, and they will be analyzed in the reading session devoted to this short text by my colleague. Moses Khorenatsi reinterprets the pre-Christian deities as prehistoric kings deified after their death by earlier generations, and claims that Vahagan is the son of the Armenian king Tigran. However, the pre-Christian motives are still present also in Moses. So, as King Tigran killed a certain Ajdahak, none other than the Avestan dragon Ajidahaka, whom Moses makes into a king of the Medes, whose wife, however, Anuish, is called Mother of Dragons, Mayer Vishapats. A similar story of a god born out of a reed is found also in Indian folklore, where the supreme god Indra is said to have withdrawn into a lotus, exhausted after having killed his enemy, the snake Vrtra, in order to gain new strength. So, Shnor HaKalutzion, thank you for your attention. This concludes the second part of the introduction to Classical Armenian.